back to the Down to the Wire podcast. We are back again after a week off. This week we're back with the football bonanza. A lot of football coming up in the next couple of weeks or so. Premier League finale, Championship playoff, Champions League, Europa League. It's all happening. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good. It's felt weird because we didn't intend on not doing anything last week, but
yeah, it's just the way it felt, wasn't it?
But yeah, it's just there wasn't particularly a lot on, and the Formula One was on a little bit of a hiatus for a week. But all in all, I've had a splendid week, so I'm in good spirits.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. And we're also joined once again by our well-known football encyclopedia that is David Williams. How are you doing, Dav?
Evening, boys. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Glad to be able to join the football bonanza this evening.
Well, we were discussing what we were going to talk about this week, and the toss-up was between the Monaco Grand Prix, and then Jack made the very good point. He was like, hang on a second. Next week we've got like
three championship final.
Yeah, it's like four
games.
like it's like a key week in football with four main things happening. It's like we've got to get Dav on.
What a time! What a time to be alive.
Oh yes, I tell you what though. In all seriousness, like we missed this last year. Like, it's weird, like, because we didn't really have this sort of scenario last year. It's almost like it's highlighted this year. It's like, whoa, like, that's a lot of things happening in 1 week.
Yeah, it's the
it
pinnacle.
does feel a bit abrupt, I think.
Do you?
I feel like it just feel like the season... In other seasons, it almost felt natural. There was something happening, maybe a week later another one. This season, it just feels like, all right, you've got 10 days, hash them all out and get them all finished now. It's like, oh, it just feels a little bit... I think I'd rather be spread out a little bit.
I think part of it is because they started the league late, didn't they? Because obviously they finished last season later. They then started this season later. Because I think they started, was it like the first week of September?
Yeah. And we've got 3 weeks to the Euro, so we got to crack on, you know.
Yeah, that is true.
Is it really only 3 weeks?
Yeah, I can understand why they've done it. Like, you know what I mean? Get it finished, get the next one ready. You know, no. I mean, they've got some international friendlies whilst the season's still on.
Yeah.
But still, I think I'd prefer.
I was just saying that might explain why it feels like it's kind of like a and done. And as well potentially because last season was like the complete opposite. It was drawn out so much. Perhaps that's why. But yeah. So from your glorious notes, Jack Freeman, it sounds like we're going to go in order of events based on when things are happening, right?
Yeah, it's not strictly because in a sense there is championship playoff semi-finals in between some of these, but I've gone on for the final. So The order I've got was the Premier League's final day, followed by the Europa League final, followed by the Championship final, followed by the Champions League final. That is the running order as such.
Very good, very good. So plenty to talk about then. Right, should we crack on?
Let's do so.
Do you want to kick us off, Jack? Because I feel like you've done a fantabulous job with these notes. I feel like you should guide us to start off.
Yeah, so, I mean, it feels very natural to start towards the top of the Premier League's sort of conversation, and most notably the top four race.
Yes.
Currently, as it stands, Chelsea 3rd, Liverpool are 4th, Leicester are 5th. Very similar to last season, where Leicester missed out with a couple of not bad performances, but unlucky results towards the end, which caused them to miss out. But yeah, same as this season, they are level on points with Liverpool, and they are a point behind Chelsea. But the goal difference is the interesting one, because Leicester have the worst goal difference. Liverpool, who have the same points, have got 4 goals more, and Chelsea, who are a point ahead, have 1 goal less than Liverpool, so they're only 3 ahead of Leicester. So the way it currently lies is if Chelsea win their game, they're automatically through. If Liverpool win their game, they're automatically through as long as Leicester don't win by a margin 4 greater than what Liverpool win by. And then sort of all the other permutations are very nitty-gritty, but the bulk of it is if you win, you're in. And if you don't, there's a high chance you're not going to be making it into Champions League.
I like that. Put that on a magnet. If you win, you're in.
If you win, you're in. That's it. Do you know what? That might be the title of this podcast. If you win, you're in.
Absolutely. firstly, guys, who out of those three teams, which three do you think deserve to get top four football this year?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I'm not saying who will, because in my opinion, who will, it's going to be Chelsea and Liverpool. But if you looked at a full body of work for the season, who do you think deserves to go into the top four? Or even is there another team who potentially even further back that should get in? It's always good to throw off-the-cuff questions up, put them in the notes.
Well, I mean, look, I will say this. Like, I don't even know how long it's been since we talked about football on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure the last time we talked about football and we discussed Liverpool, I'm almost certain that I said I don't think Liverpool will get top four.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did.
Based on how we were playing. Having said that, and I'm going to touch every piece of wood I can see around my computer right now, Liverpool have actually had a bit of an upturn in form. Like if you look at you look at that table you've got there, if you look at everyone's form, we've got the best form in the league right now. Well, I say the league, the top 10 at least. But it's a tricky one. As in, if Leicester were to miss out, like you'd be like, oh, they've been unlucky there, really, because they've been good throughout the season.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I feel like the
to be
table
fair
doesn't
to Leicester, they've from where we were looking at it previously, the last time we spoke, to where we're looking at it now, they have had to play Chelsea and Manchester United, and they maybe even have to play Manchester City in that time. So they didn't have the easiest of runnings, but
no,
I know what you mean. Looking at where it's all sort of come from to where we are now, you do look at Leicester and go, oh, you've got to be kicking yourselves.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those ones where perhaps because of the way the fixtures fell, perhaps Leicester looked in a slightly more commanding position than is actually true to... Do you get what I mean? Because like you said about the fixture list, is in like obviously if you have... And I guess... Like the opposite have happened for Liverpool. Liverpool's running is by far being the easiest out of all of them. So they've kind of crept up the table. So, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Staff?
I think in as far as who deserves it, like it's hard to not have seen Leicester's FA Cup win on the weekend and see how much of a unity there is within the club, like the owners, the fans, like the story that there is with like the tragic events of their owner dying,
and with the backdrop of the Super League stuff as well.
Yeah. There's a certain element, of the football romantic, if you will. I don't think there wouldn't be any neutral who would begrudge Leicester getting in the Champions League. And I think you could, even though it's not possible this season. 5 games ago, I'm sure there wouldn't. You would have said a similar thing about West Ham with the history there is with that club. Wouldn't that have been fun to watch them in the Champions League? But I think, like you lads have already said, on paper now, given the state of the table, given that Leicester have got the hardest fixture on paper at least, going into the final game, they're playing Spurs, aren't they? So it looks like, barring some football frenzy on Sunday afternoon, it looks like, because Liverpool have found a way to win recently and Chelsea they're going to back themselves against Villa, it looks unlikely, I would say now, doesn't it, that Leicester will get that top 4. But this season is so unpredictable. There's been a lot of... Who would have said Brighton would have beat City on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whenever it was.
True.
So it's not completely... Who's to say Villa might beat Chelsea? They beat Spurs, didn't they? Yesterday?
They beat Liverpool 7-2.
Well, so they've got the team. They've had a good season. 50 plus points this year. So who's to say that Chelsea could not win that game and Chelsea the team that miss out? It's certainly very possible that it could still go anyway, and that's the fun of it, isn't it?
It's not just getting a draw. You have to win. Like a draw's not enough for it. Well, it could be enough for Liverpool if Chelsea lose, but a draw isn't really enough. You have to win, and draws aren't uncommon. Particularly if you're looking at the table for this season, what, United have drawn 11 games, Chelsea 10, Liverpool 9. That's almost a quarter of your games. You know what I mean? 1 in 4 that you're drawing. Who's to say it doesn't happen this weekend? I mean, Leicester have probably been one of the teams that got the least draws. They got it's either win or lose. It seems a little bit with them. Perhaps maybe that is why they looked so well throughout the season, and maybe it's a little bit of a downturn now. But you know, it's not a done deal, but it does. You're looking at it on paper. You probably siding with Leicester are going to be the unlucky team this year.
Yeah, well, and just to go back to what Dav said as well, as in, you know, you said about there being upsets. When you look at Liverpool in January, their bad results weren't necessarily getting hammered by the good teams. It was a 1-0 loss to West Brom, a 2-1 loss to Southampton. And I think we lost 1-0 to Burnley as well.
That was the start of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, as in like a couple of games you looked at and you've gone, oh, Liverpool have got to be winning those. So definitely not outside the realms of possibility. But if you go in on form, then you would probably say that the team to miss out would be Leicester. But hey, what does form mean?
Speaking of Leicester, and you mentioned the FA Cup final, if you're a fan of these teams, would you prefer to win the silverware of the FA Cup or get that Champions League football? Oof. Like on paper, especially if you're a team like Spurs, you know, if you're in this predicament, you go for the trophy and the silverware. But if you're a team like Liverpool or United, where you've got the trophies of the past and it's sort of maintaining that reputation, do you think it's slightly different?
I mean, let's not forget that Leicester have already been in the Champions League previously, and they got to the quarters, I think. Was it quarters?
They lost to Atletico.
It was quite deep into the competition, wasn't it? So, I mean, obviously, I think if you're talking from a non-football perspective, like the finances of something like the Champions League, the ability to attract the top players, I think the domestic trophies can never quite compete in terms of importance, I don't think. But I honestly don't know, really, to be honest. As in, like, look, for Leicester to win silverware, I think more than anything, I think it was partly the fact that it was against Chelsea as well. And like I said, with the European Super League stuff, I think it was very much a kind of statement of, like, look, this is why we want football to kind of stay the way it is rather than having this Super League. But I think, honestly, the only way you'll ever really know which one's more important is by asking a Leicester City fan.
I think if you were to ask a player, though, because the interesting insight on this question is the Harry Kane story this week of is he going to leave or not?
Oh, yeah.
Now,
good point.
You ask Harry Kane in 10 years' time, what were the great achievements of your career, Harry? I mean, I can't speak for him, but is he going to say, I finished in the top 4 with Spurs 5 years in a row? Or is he going to say, I won this trophy and I won that trophy?
Yeah, at the end of the day, silverware is what you keep on your
cabinets
in the house.
Absolutely. And I think, while from a team perspective and a club perspective, you can obviously see the money, the financial gain of being in the Champions League. That's so hard to ignore. I appreciate that because of what that can do for your finances, transfers and all of that. But when it comes down to, ultimately, football is all about winning, isn't it? And so if you're a player in a team, that's why Kane is looking to go, because by the looks of it, because he wants to win trophies, and who can blame him for that? So,
especially when it does look like the reason he didn't get a trophy this year is because Daniel Levy was more focused on getting rid of Mourinho, in terms of going, well, I'd rather lose Mourinho and not get a trophy, because Mourinho is a cup specialist. Going into that final, he could have won that. I think.
Well,
he
the thing
definitely
is,
put
as
up
well,
a better fight than Mason.
The thing is as well, like when you look at some of the, like, let's be real, they're 7 points behind Leicester, right? So and they've got a better goal difference than Leicester, so they're 7 points behind them. Like they lost to Villa yesterday, wasn't it? Wasn't it Villa they lost
2-1.
to?
Yeah, 2-1.
Like for me, like Jose Mourinho, okay, obviously, like you can never be 100% certain, but like some of the games that Spurs have dropped points in the past couple of weeks, you look at them and you go, Spurs under Mourinho probably get a win or a draw at least.
Well,
like,
you say that, but they've been dropping points all season, haven't they? That was the problem.
You can't point to a certain point in the season where they've had good form or bad form. It's just been a consistent 2 wins and a loss. 2 wins.
But as
and
in,
a loss.
in that scenario, in that run-in, surely you'd rather have okay, perhaps he's not quite as vintage as he used to be, but surely you'd rather have Jose Mourinho going into a crunch running than Ryan Mason.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. But at the same time,
So I can see the logic of why they sacked him when they did.
You forget that Spurs were top of the table to the end of last year. But the turning point was when they were 3-0 up against West Ham at home.
And it 3-3.
And it ended 3-3. They conceded like 3 in the last quarter of an hour or something, didn't they? And there was just this, that usually that inner grit that there is in a Mourinho team to see out games.
Sticks it out, yeah.
For whatever reason, it wasn't there. And they have dropped a significant number of points from winning positions this season, which explains why. You add 5 or 6 points onto their tally, they're going into Sunday with a chance of top 4 still. But that's the difference at the end of the day, isn't it? And so I agree with you.
Fine margins, isn't it?
I don't think Mason's staying there next season, but it's just all a little bit odd, isn't it? Like there's got to be something behind the scenes we don't know about.
The thing is as well, like as a Liverpool fan, like going off briefly from the top 4 for a second, like Harry Kane leaving Spurs, as a Spurs fan, it must be devastating. And like I remember feeling the same way when Suarez left. You were just looking at it and you're going, oh, flipping heck, like that's like, let's be fair. I think Harry Kane is Spurs' best player.
By a margin. Son, maybe not an enormous one because Son is a very good guy in terms of his playability, but after Son, it's a golf.
Yeah. That must be a bit of a. And the thing is, as well, it's not just the fact that he's leaving; it's more the fact that what he's basically saying is he doesn't think the Spurs are going to be winning trophies anytime soon. And
he said he's leaving without a trophy as well.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone would have thought that looking at it, say 3 or 4 seasons ago.
Yeah, let's not forget they came runners up a few times. They came runners up. But yeah, anyway, we digress.
Shall we move down to the battle for the remaining of Europe?
Yes, race for the Europa.
Now, there is the race for the Europa. There's also the race for the Europa Conference League. We'll stick with the Europa League to start because it's a little bit more clear cut. As it stands, Leicester in 5th, and they can't not finish any lower than 5th. If that makes sense. So, and because they won the FA Cup, that means the next Europa League spot goes to 6th place. Now, West Ham currently are in 6th, 3 points clear of Tottenham in 7th, and Everton in 8th. But only Tottenham really can steal that 6th place spot off of them because of the massive goal difference swing that Everton.
Oh, wow, yeah, I've just clocked that. That's huge.
There's an 8 goal difference between Everton and West Ham. And there's a 9 goal difference between West Ham and Tottenham. So there's a massive gulf between, what Everton would need. And let's also bear in mind, Everton are playing Manchester City for the last game of the season.
Right. Yeah.
So really, there's a lot of cards stacked against them in this battle. So in all likelihood, it looks like it's going to be West Ham who go on to get the Europa League spot because they play Southampton. And Spurs play Leicester, and Leicester still have something to play for. So, I mean, unless you guys have anything further on that in particular battle to mention, the Europa Conference League is probably a more delicate thing, which we could probably discuss in a little bit more depth.
Well, I mean, one thing I will say is that if I were a Spurs fan, I wouldn't want to be playing Europa League football next season.
What about Europa Conference League? You looking forward to that?
No. So yeah, I don't think I'd want to be playing Europa League football. Just from I remember thinking this as a Liverpool fan. I think I'd rather be out of Europe. When I say Europe, as in the Europa. But then saying that, I haven't actually looked at all of the permutations of the Conference League. If you're not in the Europa, does that mean that you drop down into the European Conference League or whatever it's called?
So the way, let's go through it all now. The Europa League has shrunk in size. Previously, it was a 48-team competition, and that kind of meant if the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup were won by teams in the top 4, 5 or 6, basically in the top 7, basically all of the teams in the top 7 would be playing in those European competitions. Now that it's reduced to a 32-team setup, only 2 teams get into the Europa, and the team which wins the Carabao Cup now makes it into the Conference League instead. As the Carabao Cup was won by Manchester City this season, and they were already qualified for the Champions League, that means then 7th place is now a Conference League spot rather than a Europa League anymore. Going into what that would look like in terms of group stages for those European competitions, it's a slightly similar model to what it currently was. It's just less groups in a sense. With the Champions League, obviously the top 2 of each group goes into the knockouts. But the 3rd place teams, rather than going straight into the knockouts, they'll go up against the teams that finish 2nd in all of the Europa League group stage teams. So there's basically a playoff between all of those 2nd place and all of the sort of 3rd place finishers from the Champions League to get into the knockouts. And the teams which finish 3rd in the Europa League group stage would go into the Conference League in the same playoff format again. So it's almost that same sort of trickling effect where you just keep knocking down one to the next competition down. If you're a big team, you kind of get endless chances to win something in a way. But yeah, so 7th place is good enough to get you Europa League, and assuming West Ham win and stay let's get the Europa League spot. You've then got Tottenham and Everton on 59 points, then Arsenal on 58 points, and then there are Leeds on 56, but again, Leeds would need a 15-goal swing on Tottenham, which I don't think is very likely. So
that's
more
a hefty swing.
Yeah, so more focusing on Tottenham, Everton and Arsenal. As we mentioned before, Tottenham play Leicester and Everton play Manchester City. So that's quite interesting because those 2 teams only have a 1-point lead on Arsenal. So if both of those don't win, which is a very realistic possibility,
Plausible.
Arsenal only have to beat Brighton. Now, I know Brighton just came from 2 goals down to beat Manchester City, so who's to say Arsenal are in any better position to win their game?
Yes.
But by and large, Tottenham could end up behind Arsenal again.
Wow. Oh, man. Can you imagine that?
The embarrassment.
That is in... Honestly, that's horrific. Like, after the season that Arsenal have had, for Spurs, let's be fair, I'm pretty sure we did a podcast discussing Arsenal as like potential relegation candidates. Like they've had an absolute stinker of a season. Wow. That's wow. I don't have anything else to say about that, to be honest.
Do you think it's going to be Arsenal?
What, to get that 7th place spot?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like,
it would just be so classically Spurs.
Well, and the thing is as well, like, it's really not implausible that Leicester will beat Spurs and Arsenal will beat Brighton. As in, like, that's not, that's not really that far out there for that scenario to take place. What are your thoughts, Dav?
Yeah, well, I'll toss a coin, and it's just so hard to predict, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I think, to be honest, I actually think that Brighton, since getting their safety for another season in the Premier League, I think, they held West Ham last week to a draw. Then they beat City. So actually, I think it's quite a dangerous time to be playing a team like Brighton because of
maybe a bit more of a banana skin.
Because of the style that they play for. I think in recent weeks they've played well, but they've maybe been hindered a little by the kind of psychological, we're still not safe yet, and that's maybe just hindered them a little. But now they can just go out and play with abandon, as it were, and if it doesn't come off, it doesn't matter because they're already safe. So,
do you know
I don't think Arsenal will do
goals? The expected goals they should have scored this season would have them finishing in the top 10 had they not been so woeful in front of goal in terms of their accuracy.
Really?
Yeah, they are an incredibly... They played creative, insanely good football this year.
Which
they just
I think is
could not put it together.
That's the danger then for next year for other teams, isn't it? Like, basically, they've just got to go out and find someone who can finish. If they can get someone who would put away 20 goals for them, That is the difference between them scrapping around and being comfortable mid-table next year. And I think Graham Potter's a really good coach. And
yeah.
So you're saying they should go out and get Harry Kane?
Well, that might be a little bit beyond. That might be a little bit beyond what they. But I think they might be, in the same way Villa looked at someone like Ollie Watkins. If they look at someone who's performing at the top end of the Championship and doesn't come up, that'll be the kind of thing. I think someone who is pretty prolific in front of goal, has proven they can score goals in. Whether it's the top end of the Championship is not a million miles away from the bottom of the Premier League, and I think that would be
no.
And it would be more affordable. I think that's the kind of way that they could go. But yeah, to answer to the question, I'll just say I think Spurs will just not maybe
Say
because
where they are.
I don't think they might not necessarily beat Leicester, but I'm not sure Arsenal will beat Brighton. But they probably will now. I've said it, but you got.
I have just had a thought. I've had a thought. Teams are playing their third place goalkeepers now that they're, basically it's no bars held. Anyone can do whatever they want once they're safe. Who's to say? I mean, Man City played Scott Carson last week. Who's to say Man City don't go? We're in a Champions League final. Why are we going to waste any of our resources against Everton in a game which doesn't matter when we've got a Champions League final coming up? Could Everton find that backdoor entrance in just purely on the basis that they're the only team that manages to win because they're playing against a Manchester City side that is basically, or to be honest though, a third string Manchester City side is probably still actually better than Everton's first team. Thinking about it.
The answer is no. The answer is definitely no, Jack. But I appreciate I appreciate the intent in the question. But there's no way that Everton are scoring more than scored 8 goals against Man City.
No, they haven't got to because they've only got it to 7th. So if Tottenham don't win, then Everton just have to get a better result than Tottenham.
Oh, because I see. For the conference place.
For the conference. Oh yeah, for the Europa League's out of the question. Yeah, but for that Conference League, beautiful spot that clearly everybody desires. Could be. It could be.
Well, Everton have craved European competition for a while, so perhaps the Europa Conference could be their level.
What are your thoughts on this new structure for both the Europa and the introduction of it?
I'll speak for myself as an individual. As a Liverpool fan, I've always said I would rather not be in Europe than be in the Europa. So the thought of if you're not in the Europa, you're then in the Europa Conference is that's disgusting. What is that? Oh man.
It does. I do like the idea of clearing out the deadwood from the Europa League because when you see the Champions League, and I think everybody's happy with that when you see teams like Midtjylland make it in. I know for them it's good, but for just the prestige of the competition, you kind of want to have less of those sort of minnows in there that just going to take a pasting from these big teams. But when you get to the Europa, you notice those minnows. It is flooded with the minnows of football. So to sort of clear away a lot of that deadwood and put it into the Conference League, and then
that's a good point.
Somewhat, I do feel like it does enhance the reputation of the Europa because you're no longer playing Farmers League teams like is the old adage. You're actually playing teams who aren't perhaps at Barcelona and Real Madrid and Bayern Munich's level, but they're more so your Borussia Dortmunds, your Sevillas, your Villarreals. So I'm not against the change. And in a sense, if you are in the Conference League, I know obviously if a team classic, the Super League 6 or whatever from England, if any of those went into it, they wouldn't be particularly happy because they'd obviously want to be in the others. But at most, you're only looking at one team that could be disappointed by being in there, trying to get out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, if you look at generally in the past couple of years, by the time you get in deep into the Europa, the quality of team you've still got, you look at it and you go, actually, that's pretty good. As in, I remember when Liverpool got to the Europa, we had to play Dortmund in the knockouts, and we had to play
this lost to Sevilla in the final, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. But then the following
season,
decent teams. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, that's Dortmund when they had Aubameyang, Royce, Matt Hummels. Is it that's Dortmund? Not at Dippy because Goethe had gone by that point, but as in they were a very good side. played a very good Sevilla team. And like I think a couple of seasons ago, like it was Atletico versus Arsenal in the final, like that. Okay, maybe in this season Arsenal aren't quite up there, but as in Arsenal for years have been top four. So it's a very valid point, and perhaps something that I hadn't really thought about. That by having the Europa Conference may be a bit of a dirge, but by dropping some of those teams out of the Europa, it kind of makes dropping them out of the Europa makes it a bit more of an appealing proposition. Perhaps,
do you think actually it could even be appealing to those teams to be in a conference league where there are less of those? In a sense, it's like a third wave of it. Teams like Villa, in a sense, going up against their equivalents from the others, because they won't get an opportunity to play them on very often occasions. See teams like Town. They're obviously they can't now qualify for the Europe, but they'll be into the conference if they win the Welsh leagues or whatever. So do you think it perhaps could even be a little bit more attractive to them as well, this format?
I think it could.
Sorry, Dave, go on.
Yeah, no, I think it could. In that, I think the whole point of it was to give more clubs from more countries a chance to participate. So I think they've said that there's going to be 34 countries represented across the 3 tiers of European competition. So they're obviously, every year in like July you have like all the Champions League qualifiers, and every year, like you've said, you have Town, TNS, Barry. They always get to like the third preliminary round, having like gone to the Faroe Islands and Gibraltar and Cyprus and where all these.
Well, Cardiff Met Uni nearly made it in, didn't they? Wouldn't you?
Yeah. So I can understand. To be fair, like if you're a Liverpool fan, you probably don't fancy it. But if you're a supporter of Barry Town or Town, you might think, oh, what a chance to play in some European competition. So
do you know what? Yeah, I remember Liverpool. I'm sure, like the year after we won the Champions League, like there was the off season where like Gerrard was like basically on his way to Chelsea. And then he stayed, and his first game was against TNS in the knockout stage of the Champions League.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, what is this? But yeah, no, you're right. Sorry, Dav, interrupted.
Yeah, no. So, you can see how that might be appealing to like the smaller associations, really, isn't it? But then it's interesting when David Moyes was speaking about this in a press conference earlier this week. He said, for a team like them who've not been in Europe for a while, to be playing European football next season would be an achievement. But even he, as a manager, was wary of like a third tier competition. There is an element of reluctance because, you have the goal of getting into Europe, but then playing Thursday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Like you say, Jack, you can eventually. You might change your mind on whether being in Europe is actually a good idea. And the most random thing of it all is because it's not allowed to clash with the Europa League, they'll play, the kickoff will be 3:30 on a Thursday. That prime time slot, people are going to book the afternoon off work to come home and watch Town play some random team from Liechtenstein or something.
And the Europa Conference. Well, yeah, and I mean, the thing is, Dav, I think, like, ultimately, I don't think no competition is going to satisfy everyone.
Yeah.
But I think even for a team like Villa, surely you'd look at it and go, well, if the option is to play, like you say, to have Sunday, Thursday, or to perhaps just play on the weekends and have a chance at, perhaps even finishing 8th in the Premier League, like, does the fact that it's... I feel like the Europa Conference League is just saying, oh, we're in Europe for the sake of saying, oh, we're in Europe. As in, I don't think it really means a lot because the quality is going to be...
You still have to finish in the same positioning that you would have had to get Europa in a sense. Like 7th place before would have given you Europa. Now it just gives you a Conference League. Like I know obviously there's less glamour to it because you're in a Conference League and not the Europa, but as the prestige of the team to say, yeah, we did finish 7th. I think that's still there in a sense. I don't think people look at it as a dirge, because in a sense, a team like Villa unless they finish seventh, they're still not going to. It's still not just a hand me out, walk in, here you go, have European football regardless. You still got to finish in a good position to get there. But I get what you mean. In a sense, even if you get into it, you're not going into. I mean, like you think about when Leicester made it to the Champions League. I know they just won the Premier League, and that was the big hurrah story.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams thought Leicester are going to go on and win the Champions League now. I know that's the great thing about the football pyramid is that any team can theoretically go on and win the Champions League from any position. But I don't think anybody thought Leicester were going to do that. So when you've got teams, like you were saying, Villa, and if they get into a Conference League rather than Europa League, perhaps maybe they do take those sort of competitions more seriously because they think we actually have a better opportunity to win this.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I know when we started the Still segment on the Europa, I said I've never been a fan of the Europa League. I think it's relative to what team you support. As in, like, 100%. As a Liverpool fan, as a Liverpool fan, your objective, okay, I know we won the league last season, but for many years, the objective for Liverpool was top four football.
Yeah.
Top four football was the most important thing. So when you then end up in the Europa and you're having to play, like Davis said, you're having to play teams like on the far side of Sweden, and then you're having to go to Austria, and it's not as appealing because what you really want as a Liverpool fan is Champions League football. However, for a team like Leeds, for example, if there's the opportunity of European football, like if it's the Europa, then that is appealing. However, I do feel like I can't get my words out. The Europa Conference, I feel like that's, I don't know how appealing that is really as a even if you are like a Villa or a Leeds, like, do you really want to be playing in those sort of games when, it's more stress on your players? It can impact your performance in the league you're playing in, like domestically. I don't know. I
know what you mean. At the beginning of a season,
I'm torn.
At the beginning of a season, if you look at who could be the surprise package of the year, quite often I'll pick a team who's not in any European competition because they can put all of their resources into getting a good position.
Like when you look at when Chelsea won the league under Conte, like one of the big things that people were saying was, like, and this is not taken away from Chelsea because they were excellent that season, but like one of the big things they were saying is, Chelsea haven't got European football this year. And I do think it makes, like when Liverpool, I'm trying to think now, when Liverpool, that the Klopp's first, hang on, I'm getting my dates mixed up now. I can't remember whether it was his first full season or his second full season. When Liverpool got top four, I was looking at it and going, if we had Europa League football, we would not be getting top four. Like, it's as simple as that. So, and, like, I'm saying this because it's happened to Liverpool and it can happen to anybody. Like, Jack, can you imagine as a United fan, if you had a bad season, you ended up in 7th, and then you're having to play in the Europa Conference?
Yeah, I'd hate it personally, but Dav, as a Swans fan, do you relish the prospect of getting to the Conference League? Assuming you went up this season and something to build upon, would you want to look towards that?
Well, we played in the Europa League a couple of years ago, and there wasn't this. Well, I suppose, it was. We had some great nights, but in reflecting on it, we still we went away to Valencia and beat them 3-0 on their own patch. So what I'm thinking is, I think you would be, you probably would be in favour of it in the sense it's good to be playing in Europe, but what kind of teams would you be playing? So we played Valencia, we ended up going out to Napoli, but just the fact that the Swans played Napoli, it was that in itself was, no one can complain.
Huge, yeah.
We had a good run.
It's like when Fulham beat Juve.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Whereas, so an element of the attraction is playing against the big clubs,
top teams.
Having they come to you.
So
maybe if you're fortunate enough, you can go away and
so would you actually be against a conference then, in the sense that you probably have less of those big teams that make it that bit more exciting?
The thing with the thing with getting into the Europa was that particular season was. The season after, it was a struggle because you were playing Thursday, Sunday, and it's happened with a lot of other teams. With the resources that you have available, it really does. Then you're looking over your shoulder, thinking we just need to stay up this year, because it really strains you. So it depends on how much you're gonna go for it. Like we were playing our strongest team on a Thursday night, because you wanted to do well in Europe, because we might not get into Europe again until who knows when. But then, you're coming home and you're playing Palace away on the Sunday, and you've got to make some changes because, you've been in Spain or Italy only 48 hours ago. And, we've seen that in the past, haven't we, with Burnley and when teams have come close to going down because they've been in the mix for a... I say Burnley, like they didn't even get through to it, did they? But they played like 8 or 9 qualifying games beforehand. Yeah. So, I don't know. On the one hand, I would say yes, because you'd be for it as a fan of a club like the Swan, because you would want to be able to play in Europe. But part of the attraction is you want to have at least one tie that's like, they were a good team. So, I don't know, you can see it both ways, really.
It's like with the FA Cup when a League 2 team gets a Premier League team. It's a sort of, I remember when Forest got Arsenal in the FA Cup and they went on to beat them 5-2 in Forest. It was like, here we go. What's going on? Like, you do get those special occasions where you just see those freak results against big teams. And you're like, yeah, that was good. So I do get what you mean there, Dav. It is something about great you're in it, but you do want to play the big teams. Yeah. True.
We'll review it next season.
Yeah.
Yeah. See how it goes, and then we'll come back.
We're all going to hate it.
Yeah. I'm not going to say anymore. I feel like I've ranted about it. Anyway.
Speaking of the Europa, it is the Europa League final on Wednesday, the 26th of May.
Phase 2 of the podcast.
Villarreal versus United. I don't have too much to say on this one because, truth be told, the case is whenever you get into the latter stages of European competitions, we can all talk about the riches of PSG and the quality of teams like Bayern. But when it comes to the Europa League, I don't know anything about Villarreal. All I know is they play Manchester United. And Unai Emery is Villarreal's manager. He's won it 3 times in a row with Sevilla. Solskjaer hasn't won anything at United. And Villarreal are 7th in La Liga, which means they have to win this if they want Champions League football next year. Anybody got any thoughts on that game?
Yes, good evening. I think
good evening.
I think just the fact that it is Emery, like he knows how to win this competition, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's won it. Yeah. He's won it 3 times in the past, and he's got Villarreal to a final for the first time. So it's kind of like, and you say about Mourinho, like Spurs brought him in to win a cup. Like Villarreal, they've got Emery in to do a job, and to be fair, he's done a job because they've never got to a final to a European final before. So
seriously.
Yeah.
No.
That's Yeah. I think that's
they've always been a decent team.
They've always been in and around, haven't they?
I'm surprised they've never made it to a final. That's incredible.
Yeah, the season that we got to the final, we had Villarreal in the semis, I think, for the Europa.
I think that's right. I think that's right to say. I know from like the gossip columns for what may or may not happen next season that they have got some certain Paco Alcacer, Gerard Moreno. Moreno is a Spanish international. I know some teams have shown some interest in him, and they've got a centre back, Pau Torres, who's 24. I think I've called him by his right name. They've got a lot of good players who. But
they're no mugs.
By Moreno, do you mean the Alberto Moreno who used to play for Liverpool?
Oh no, Gerard Moreno. He's is Spanish striker.
Oh, the striker.
Yeah, striker.
Yes. Well, when you said Gerard and then you said a Moreno, I was just thinking they were 2 different people. Gotcha.
Yeah. So they've got some good players there, but I feel like Villarreal are the kind of team where if they didn't get into Champions League or whatever, they would just get picked off by bigger clubs. They've got a lot of history. They've got a history though with do you remember Marcos Senna? He played for Spain. Spain. Diego Forlan played for them. So they've got heritage.
Did he?
Yeah, apparently. So you've got with Villarreal, you've got a bit of heritage there. So for them just to get to this final is impressive. But then you've got that on the one hand with Emery, and then on the other hand, you've got United, who I mean, you can tell me this, Jack, as a United fan. Is it? I think it's right to say this is their longest run without a trophy, since the 80s.
Yeah, most likely, yes.
So the pressure on next Wednesday is huge, isn't it? After they lost in the semi to Sevilla last year, there's got to be they've got
The
to win
only
it. haven't
blessing, the only blessing of it all is we have Champions League football guaranteed. I'd hate to go into this competition now in fifth place knowing you have to win it. I'm pretty sure when we had Mourinho at the helm and he won the Europa, in that situation we had to win the Europa to get into the Champions League.
Yeah.
So I'm glad the pressure's not on in that element. And to be honest, I think that might allow them to play with a little bit more freedom, a little bit less caginess. But Solskjaer's big issue as Man United manager has been getting past semi-finals. And he's done that. So this is his first final. So who knows whether the hoodoo comes up again. But, I mean, so far he's had a pretty good Europa League in terms of he hammered Roma in the previous round. I know I think we may have lost the second leg, but it was an enormously high-scoring affair. But I know you were saying before about Emery, a bit wary of him because, I mean, even though his reputation took a bit of a hit at Arsenal, am I right in saying that last year he took PSG to the semis? Or to the final?
No, not last year. That was Tuchel. He was at PSG
right,
before he went to Arsenal, wasn't it?
True. Yeah.
So he won titles in France.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean... Sorry, Jack, go on.
I was just going to say, yeah, so I'm a bit wary of him because he has got that sort of calibre about him. That he does just know how to win these competitions.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like on paper, if you look at the two teams, you'd probably have United as favourites, I think. But I feel like Villarreal are kind of like that dangerous underdog, as in like you said, Dav, like they've got some really good players. To be honest with you, like when I look at it, it's fairly similar to like when Liverpool were in the Europa against Sevilla, as in like probably on paper you would have had maybe Liverpool as favourites, but as in like Sevilla, as they did, like if you don't play well, they are going to pick you off. And yeah, I think the Unai Emery and Solskjaer kind of battle will be interesting. But yeah, who knows if Villarreal, this is the first time they've been in this sort of scenario. They need it if they want Champions League football, as in could that be the big motivator? Who knows?
I think a key...
We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
When you think of United, right, you think, of the players that are really on form at the moment, and even the season. So you think Fernandes, his stats are ridiculous this year, aren't they? Like 28 goals and 18 assists. So 46 goal involvements this season in 57 games.
Yeah.
You've got Cavani, who's on a goal a game since April at the moment.
He's at form at the moment, isn't he?
But despite all of that, can you believe that we're talking about the Europa League final and saying, does it all hang on whether Harry Maguire's fit or not?
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be fit. I don't think he'd even risk it if he was, just because the Euros coming.
But he's played 50 games this season.
Yeah, he hadn't missed a minute up until the point that he got an injury.
So he's been he's been at the heart of that defence all season. Is that, given that you've got Alcacer and Moreno, who, they're good forwards for Villarreal, is that where the difference could be made?
Possibly.
I'm just going to hope it's a high scoring affair, because I'll be honest, I don't trust in Lindelof and Bailly like I do with Maguire and anyone.
No. Because
he just seems to have that a bit more level-headedness. I know Liverpool obviously haven't had Van Dijk for the bulk of this season. Maybe I wasn't unsympathetic to them. I still don't think all of United's troubles, because I know they haven't had a particularly good run of form for the last few games. I mean, to be fair, they did just hand Leicester their win, but it was disappointing to lose this to Liverpool in the circumstance. But yeah, we didn't have Maguire for that one, and you didn't have Van Dijk, so that's two platforms no one's working off of. But yeah, I'd be disappointed not to see him play, but at the same time, completely understand if he doesn't. Yeah.
And as a United fan, Jack, if they were to win, would you say that you'd had a successful season?
To be honest, I was thinking about this whilst you were talking earlier. I thought we haven't really had a bad season in any facet, apart from that one game against Istanbul Başakşehir, where we lost in the Champions League group stage, because we'd done the hard bit. We beat, PSG and Leipzig. Yeah. We'd done the hard bit, and the second time round, we lost. I think we might even drawn against one of them, but then we lost to Istanbul Başakşehir, however you say it. And it was just like, And that meant we finished third, go into the Europa, and we've been fine in the Europa since. We swept past some teams with insane ease. So by all accounts, I know what you mean, because we're coming away from a season second place, good finish, but no silverware. Is it disappointing? To be honest, though, I think after the sort of turbulence of the last few years, and particularly when you've seen how good Liverpool and City, United's biggest rivals, have been, it's just nice to be second. It's just nice to be in the top four for consecutive seasons. It's just nice to have that bit of stability where there's not that question every transfer window in terms of, is the manager going to stay, is he going to go? It just sounds like, even after last season, I was saying we need to invest more. Ollie's not been given anything. I know he obviously spent a lot on Bruno, and he's done really well, but it's like you're Manchester United at the end of the day. And I think after the Super League debacle, I do think the Glazers have got to open that checkbook a little bit more to show the fans they are willing to cooperate. So I do think there's going to be a bit of a war chest for them to have this summer. But by and large, you look at the season, second place, a Europa League final, FA Cup semi, where we lost to Leicester, and I don't know where we went in the Carabao. Quarter, there we go. So by and large, we didn't pass up on anything. And I know we may have been a bit short-sighted or small-minded in some of the big games in the Premier League, where we just went out there to get a draw and just don't let the other team win. But I think sometimes there was good signs this season, particularly with the period where we didn't concede, for quite a few games in a row, just getting that defence locked down where we'd never concede more than one for quite a while. And it was just that, just don't lose, lads. Just don't lose. Don't let the negativity come in. And
is it painful to say that? Because realistically, I would agree with you that it's not been a bad season realistically when you look at the competition. But go back 10 years under Ferguson, that answer that you've just given would not cut the mustard, would it?
No, 100% not. But that's because of the high expectations you get with the Ferguson era. There was that almost swagger and invincibility about the team that it doesn't matter who you're up against, you knew Manchester United could come up on the day and win a game. There was just so many world-class players in that team. But I do think football now is different to football then. I think I was just mentioned to Jack a couple of days ago, not even on the podcast. We were talking, actually it might have been Josh's brother. We were talking about Man City and the fact that they can field up to 3 first teams effectively with how many, the wealth of options they got in their positions. I don't think any Manchester United side in history has had that many options. I know we had a period where we had Tevez, Berbatov, Rooney and Ronaldo all on one team, and that was great. But at no situation have we been able to put an entire side away and then bring out an entirely, you look at Ferran Torres, he's barely been used by City this season, and he goes on and scores a hat-trick. It's like, oh my goodness, the wealth of options they've got. So you look at what we are competing with now, and it's a completely different beast to what we've been competing with in the past. So to come second, looking at it on paper of what we've got and what they've got, I'd take it. But you look back 10 years, and if we'd have kept on that track, if Ferguson was a 50-year-old rather than a 70-odd-year-old, obviously it might, things might be different. But he's not, and we had him for all those years, and he was really good for us. But by and large, that era's over, and you're just going to work on with it.
It's very diplomatic of you, Jack. Good answer.
Thank you. Anyway, let's go talk about your team then, Zav, because we'll talk about the Championship next.
Where the real football happens.
Yeah.
Where the real football
happens. Absolutely. Where anyone can beat anyone, football. That's what we like. But we won't talk about your team first. We'll talk about the Brentford-Bournemouth, because that's the notes. That's the way I've done them. But yeah, Brentford-Bournemouth. The first leg's already taken place. Bournemouth won 1-0. They now go to Brentford with that lead. Bournemouth were in the Premier League last season. And last season, Brentford were in the same situation. They got to the Championship playoff final and they lost. What do you in terms of Brentford, firstly, do you think they can afford to lose this time? Because the last time they lost Ollie Watkins. They lost said by Ben. I've lost the name. Benrahma.
Benrahma.
Yeah, 2 of the better players. Do you think they can afford to not win this tie?
Well, it's always billed as like, the 100 million or the 150 million pound game. So in that sense, you could say no, they can't afford to not get promoted.
That's a steep loss.
Well, it is. But you've just said that there. But here they are again.
But how long can you keep that up? That's
I know. Like, so what was it? So they sold Watkins for 28 million, rising to 33. They sold Ben Rama to West Ham for like 20 million, I think it was. But then who they brought in, even Tony they brought him in from Peterborough for 5 mil, with add-ons that might take it up to 10. So and he's top scorer in the Championship this season. So the question really is, like, could they keep that up? So the manager there, Frank, he's got a job on his hands to keep turning that over and to keep that level. The fact that they've been so close the last 2 years, there's a part of me that, as a neutral, if the Swans weren't in the mix, I'd probably want them to get it, because they are a smaller team. They don't have the budgets that other teams have got. But I think there might well be a breaking point in the sense of, unfortunately, because of the way finances work in football, like most Championship teams, they've either got to sell their best players or rely on owners to financially survive. So will there be a breaking point for them? Well, who's to say? At the moment, they moved into their new stadium this season, so this coming weekend they'll have fans in for the first time in that new stadium. So I think they've got a lot going for them, and even if they don't get promoted this season, I think they'll still be in the mix next season, just because of the way the club seems to be run. And I think as long as the manager's there, then there's no reason why they couldn't give it another go. But chances are one or two of their better players might well be picked off again, because that's the nature of it. That's what happens. And you haven't even got to finish in the top 6 to have your best players pinched if you've got one or two
Forest
players.
Lost Matty Cash to Villa, and I was devastated by that. Best right back in the Championship.
Yeah, but no one's gonna. The difficulty with a lot of those moves are no one begrudges Matty Cash like that, because good for him. He's played well, and he's continuing to play well. So, So I suppose on the one hand you could say no, Brentford probably couldn't afford to not get promoted, but then you'd say that about all the teams. So,
fair. I mean, particularly when you see, I think it was when Cardiff, Wolves, I can't remember what other team came up, but if they hadn't gone up that season, I think all 3 of them were looking at, quite severely double-digit losses for those seasons.
I thought it was Villa and Newcastle, wasn't it?
Nope.
I'm sure Villa was one of them.
Yeah, I think it was Villa with Wolves and Cardiff.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. But when they came up, there was like, if they didn't get it that season, they were severely going to take a hit. And I mean, I don't know what the situation is in terms of Brentford, because obviously when you sell big name players and you're buying, as you say, 5 mil guys from Peterborough, they probably aren't gathering those sort of wage demands, which some others don't. But yeah, the financial side, as you say, and there's only a certain amount of time you can do this until, I mean, particularly when you're battling up against the Premier League teams who are coming down. I mean, Bournemouth, they're getting parachute payments this year, and if they don't get it this year, they'll have parachute payments next year, and they'll get it the year after. So it's got to be incredibly hard for those teams that haven't been Premier League teams before to ever get a foot in that door, because they just know the beasts that are coming down are just a different kettle of fish to what they have to play for the remainder of the season. Just can't afford physically, I don't think, at the end of the day. But yeah, talking about Bournemouth, just come down from the Premier League. They've lost an absolute abundance of high-quality players. They've lost Nathan Ake, Callum Wilson, Aaron Ramsdale, Ryan Fraser, Jordan Ibe, Jermaine Defoe and Joshua King. All guys that last season were starters pretty much, maybe apart from Defoe, because he was sort of that utility guy. But they've still been able to push for promotion. Is this good recruitment from them in a sense? Is there a strategy? Or do you think they'll perhaps regret letting all of those guys go? Because in a sense, if they get promoted, they haven't got those guys anymore, so they haven't got all that experience that they used to have in that squad.
Yeah, I think there's always that element of when you go down, you're going to lose some of your best players, and in the sense of the amount of money that Bournemouth brought in, I don't know what they got for every player, but just to pick up three. So Ake went to Man City for 41 million, Wilson went to Newcastle for 20 million, and Ramsdale, he went to Sheffield United for 18.5. So that's 80 million pounds they got from those three players. So I'm sure they don't regret that.
No, that's probably a good part, especially with Ramsdale, because he's not been that great for them.
Yeah, and those players, they probably were good enough to be in the Premier League. So you can't deny them that. I think they've obviously filled the gaps and recruited well and kept some players, but I don't think really it makes too much difference that they let those guys go, because you look at teams that have gone up in the past. Look at Leeds this season, for example. The amount of Premier League experience in that team isn't that high. But they've done very well. I remember when the Swans got promoted back in 2012, 2011. I'm getting old. One of those seasons. We had no Premier League experience in that squad, hardly anything. But if you've got a manager, and that's what you're seeing with Leeds, if you've got a style of play, if you've got an ethos, if you've got a team togetherness, experience is important for sure. If you can have some of that, great. But I don't think it's the be all and end all. And they're going up still they've still got Begovic in goal, and they've got Jack Wilshere on the bench. They've got players there who have been in and around the Premier League and know how to play there. Dominic Solanke, I know he never really hit the heights with Liverpool and that, but he's
Julius Stanislas.
Yeah, you've got players who've played there. David Brooks, he played there last season. He's still there. So, I think that, yeah, okay, they have let some of their better players go, but such is football, and yeah, I think they're in the driving seat, aren't they, going into the second leg? But it's certainly all to play for between the two of them.
Perfect. Out of those two, how do you think the semi's going to shape out? Who do you think's going to win? What do you think the scenario's going to be?
Well, I've already kind of said that with my heart, I'd prefer Brentford just from the kind of story of it. They've never been up. They've played some good football over the last 2 years, and I think it's good for the Premier League to have different teams there, isn't it? Like when Bournemouth went up first time around a few years ago, everyone was like, it's great to see a new team getting in amongst it. So I think I'd like to see Brentford do it, but Bournemouth are in the driving seat. But it's only a goal. They've only got a 1-goal advantage, and there's not much to split between the two. So I guess I'd go with Bournemouth. They've got the advantage, and it's theirs to lose at this stage. But last season, the Swans beat Brentford 1-0 at home, and then went away to Brentford, and Brentford beat us 3-1. So Brentford could easily turn that round on the weekend. So I've basically said anyone could win it, haven't I? So
no, you did it in a good way. Did it in a way which really doesn't lead any listener to understand which way it's really going to end up. But yeah, hopefully it. Well, I agree with you. I would like to see Brentford up rather than Bournemouth, purely for that. Especially when you see some of the players that they've sort of developed there in terms of, we were talking about Ollie Watkins earlier. It's just good to see those sort of teams which have a decent academy about them getting their guys through. Going on to then the leg which does include your team, Swansea. Am I right in saying this is Swansea's last season of parachute payments?
Yeah, it is. It is. So you get 40 million-ish first year, 35 mil second year, and then 15 million the third year. So it has been reducing season by season. But yeah, this is the last year now where we'll have those payments.
What players do you think you might have to let go of assuming you don't get any more parachute payment? Well, yeah, you won't.
Yeah, assuming we don't go up. Andre Ayew will definitely go unless he's going to play for free, because I don't. I mean, nobody knows, but given that he's basically still on a Premier League contract, he's probably on anywhere in the region of £4 or £5 million probably. That's a guess off some basic maths. Even call it £3 million. It's a significant chunk of money for a Championship club.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like the one Premier League player that we've kept. I mean, he was on loan for a couple of seasons in between, but he came back, and he scored the winner on Monday night. So you could say that's why we've done it, and it's a gamble, but he's a great character to have around the squad, and he's spoken very well of us and the journey and loving his time at the club, because he's good enough to play in the Premier League, not necessarily in a top team, but he is good enough to be playing in the Premier League, or in the top league in Spain or in France. So he certainly could be playing for a better team than the Swans, but fair play to him. He's wanted to do what he can to get us back. But yeah, he would certainly go. I can't see any way he stays if we don't go up. And then possibly one or two others. I don't know. I'd like to think we could keep. The challenge really every season is not only who can you sign, but who can you keep as well. Like our squad has been kind of thinned out over the last couple of years. So anyone who's been any good, Joe Roden, Dan James, Ollie McBurney, they've gone up to the Premier League. And like I was saying about Brentford earlier, sadly that's the way it works. You've got to sell your better players in order for them to just survive financially. Having said that, the Swans are not in the worst financial position compared to other Championship clubs, so I'd be confident of us not doing a Wigan or a Sunderland, where even if we don't go up this season and we don't get any more parachute payments, I don't think we're going to collapse through the floor but it does obviously blunt then your ability to be able to who you're going to bring in. You've basically got a different a different approach, like you said, Jack, about academies. You're focusing on that, developing players, trying to buy players on the cheap from League One maybe, and you're trying to spot the gems and bring them on. So, you can do that to a point, and I think to get to the playoffs with the squad that we've got 2 seasons in a row has been really impressive. I don't think anybody can. I think, I mean, I know some fans do think Cooper hasn't done well enough, but I don't see how you can say that given what he's had to spend, given what he's had to work with. And so, similar to the Brentford scenario, if we don't go up, then who's to say that we couldn't compete next season? But then you look at who's coming down again. West Brom are coming down, Fulham are coming down. Well, if Scott Parker stays at Fulham, you'd fancy them to give it a good go going back up. So it's a very, very tough league, and I'm not sure whether you'd have to sell your players like Ayew. Not sell. His contract would be coming to an end, and he just wouldn't renew. You'd be losing these players, and it would just make it that little bit harder.
You mentioned some of the good teams coming down. The team you're up against currently is a team we've spoken of in the past being quite familiar, in good form, shall we say, previously. They were in a streak where they'd won 7 in a row. They went on a streak where, including those 7 in a row, they didn't lose in 10 games. Are you worried that this Barnsley side could turn up in the second leg? I mean, particularly when you think that the last few games everyone's sort of been resting guys because there was nothing to play for, because who the playoff teams were was decided quite a long time ago because of the gap between the 6th and 7th. But do you think this Barnsley team could turn up?
Oh, well, yeah, of course they could turn up. I think that is the worry. They could turn up and play a blinder. I was heartened by the defensive display on Monday, though, by the Swans. Like the second half, and they had the crowd in, so it's just the home fans. It was rocking there. But we've beaten them 1-0 3 times now this season. So whatever it is, we seem to have worked out how to play them. So our centre backs, Ben Cabango, Mark Gui, both 20-year-old lads, they were excellent on Monday night. So yeah, I think Barnsley have shown enough this season they could turn up and play a blinder. But I'd like to think that if we don't need to change anything from Monday really. And I mean, I'm hoping the difference will be having the fans in. So we'll have that home advantage. We'll have the fans on side. We can get the ball down and just play a bit more. We weren't really able to play very much on Monday because of the way Barnsley came at us. And so, yeah, I am a bit concerned. It's only one goal, the same as the other leg, the other tie. It's only a 1-goal advantage, so it could turn in an instant. But
the difficulty being, obviously, you're at home this time, and the away goals rule. If this becomes a goal fest, they only have to win by 1 in a sense, and they're automatic. Or is there no goal difference?
There is no away goal in the playoffs.
Ah, cracking! Oh, that's good, because I'm not for the goal away goals rule. So that's good.
Old-fashioned football, how it's meant to be.
Yeah, win on
the real football.
The
I told you, this is where the real football is played.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, are you assuming Swansea's going to win that game?
Oh, I never assume anything, Jack.
Okay, I'll assume on your behalf. I'll assume that the Swansea are going to go out there and trounce them. And I'm not touching any wood. Assuming it's... No, to be honest, I do have a wooden bedside table.
Be around on your head, mate. Come on. It's all a favour.
Who do you think's going to win the playoff final then, if it's Swansea versus Bournemouth, assuming the current leaders?
Dear. I just can't do it because it's
can't bring yourself to say it.
You can't. I just don't think you can assume it, can you? Because I think that's what I struggle with. The first part of it, it could easily be Barnsley Brentford. I think that's what's good about it is sometimes you do have one team that's like, they really deserve it. But I think each of the team over 90 minutes are good enough. So obviously, if you put a Swansea Bournemouth final in front of me, I'd have to go with my heart overruling my head on that, just because would you be a fan if you didn't? But I really don't know, because Bournemouth they beat us quite comfortably not that long ago. But it's a playoff final and it's 90 minutes, isn't it? Like, I think on our day we could win that game. Yeah, so I've got to answer your question and say the Swans because they're the team at the end of the day. But I can't. At the moment I wouldn't be confident that would be the final anyway.
Oh, fair. Well, so just on the flip side, assuming your Swans are getting through to this final, that's just me saying that. Who would you rather be playing, Brentford or Bournemouth?
Oh, well...
As a matchup for the Swans, that is, rather than...
as a what for the Swans?
As a matchup for the Swans, rather than, which team do you think's better? Which team do you think suits better for the Swans style of play?
Yeah, I think we've drawn twice with Brentford this season. So we're pretty matched with them, even though our styles of play are we're much more defensive, whereas Brentford have gone and scored a bit more freely than we have. Out of the two, I'd rather play Brentford. I think Bournemouth, they do have, when they get going, they can be quite dangerous. Not that Brentford aren't, but I think because of the squad they still have generally from last season, they've maybe got a little bit more. And after they beat us in the semi-final last year, that would be a tasty little rematch, wouldn't it?
I didn't realise that. Oh yeah.
So I'd say Brentford. That would be good. A good story, wouldn't it?
Good football. Yeah, good story. Moving on then. Champions League final.
The champions. Need to be careful, get copyright for that.
No one could tell with that. That was beatboxing. That was for those who are unaware. Chelsea versus Manchester City. I sort of broken this down to a few different talking points.
Key areas.
For the final.
Key battlegrounds.
firstly, first conversation piece I want to bring up is fitness, because City wrapped up the league title a while ago. They were knocked out of the FA Cup final by Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. So they haven't actually had anything to do competitively for a long time. Whilst Chelsea, they've been in an FA Cup final, an absolute dogfight to get top four football. Do you think the fitness side of things is going to come into this? Or do you think, as I put a little bit further down, do you think this could come down to form, where the team which is sort of used to playing these backs against the wall, gotta win all the time games, is going to be the sharper tool coming into the final?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a valid point. Is there the potential that, City are going into this game a little bit undercooked, having not had to, like when you look at some of the fixtures they've had, apart from Chelsea, which they lost, on paper they haven't. Would I be right in saying they haven't had the most difficult fixtures?
Who's this now?
City.
They
in the
beat
past couple of
PSG.
weeks.
Oh, the past one. No, not really. They just lost to Brighton, as we mentioned before. I got a feeling they played. Oh no, I've mentioned Leicester. I can't 100% remember, but I'll
They
try and
played
find them whilst we
Newcastle
chat.
last Friday, didn't they?
Okay.
And
So
then-
big teams.
And then they lost to Chelsea the weekend before that.
Yeah. So
Chelsea. Yeah, I knew there was a team towards the top.
I mean, there is an element as well. Like when you look at the way that City play, does it perhaps lend itself to not being the fittest of fit football teams? Perhaps a little bit because they pass the ball around a bit more possession based, as in let the ball do the work, sort of.
So interesting.
Well,
So I think
maybe.
that's a minor point.
I'm not sure whether I'm just being a bit simple about this, but at the end of the day, they're all elite athletes, aren't they? So they've all played the same amount of games. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of a difference fitness is really going to make at this stage of the season. Because bluntly, they'll all be shattered.
But the thing
Yeah.
is, City have rested their first team squad for a few games now. I mean, you consider they're playing Scott Carson and quite a lot of their not so prevalent first teamers for a little bit. De Bruyne obviously is going to be coming off of an injury.
I mean,
into the final.
you're a brave man, Jack, to say that City have got a first team, because if they had a first team, fantasy managers would have more
I know what you
confidence
mean,
on
pep
their
roulette.
yeah exactly.
To be fair, I am one of those who took out all of my Man City assets about 8 weeks ago, because there was absolutely no way I was going to predict who was playing when. Wasn't worth the gamble.
Yeah, but that's because of what you've already said. Their depth is that good. Like, if you look at the team that played Brighton the other night, yeah, De Bruyne didn't play, but otherwise, it was pretty strong.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
against Newcastle, yeah, he played Carson in goal, he played Garcia and Ake as centre-back. But otherwise, it's very possible you could look at each of them, you could go Bernardo Silva, yeah, he could start in Champions League final.
Yeah, I feel like
you could go through them all and say they could start. They're that good.
yeah. I mean, I feel like with City, at no point have you looked at that team and gone, that's a sack-a-rate team. You've looked at it and gone like, oh, well, they played Scott Carson there, and they've perhaps got a second-choice centre-half and maybe a third-choice winger or whatever. But, dotted in between them then, like you said, Dad, you've got Bernardo Silva, who is quite easily a starter for City. You've got Gundogan, who is a starter for City, as in you've got good players. So they've perhaps not fielded their strongest lineup, but I don't think they've played like a B team then, for example.
I think.
What do you think is going to happen this weekend? Because it's going to be a week until the Champions League final. Do you think they'll play their best team this weekend, in a sense? Get the blood flowing?
Well, if you look at the last two games, De Bruyne hasn't played, so that maybe says all you need to know about the kind of game plan and what Pep's thinking. He's wanting to keep him back, and I think you could see. I'd be surprised if Diaz played this Sunday.
Yeah, it's not a bad show.
Just one or two though. I don't think maybe Mahrez, he might not start either because he's been playing well for them recently. But I could only maybe name those three. Maybe you could say Foden is in such good form he won't start. But otherwise, Sterling didn't play much in the Champions League semi-finals, did he? But if Sterling plays this weekend, you're not going to say, oh, Sterling's not going to start next weekend, no?
No.
No,
It's,
that's the thing with City, isn't it? They've got so much depth.
yeah.
I don't think it's not as simple as if they play this week, they're not playing next week. I think, and ultimately, could Pep Guardiola use this weekend as a right? This is the team that I like. He may say to his players, "This is the team I'm thinking for the Champions League final. You're playing today. Prove me wrong." I don't think that's out of the question.
That would be absolutely insane mind games by Pep. Just to field no player that he fields on this weekend is currently in the squad for the Champions League final. He says to each of them, "None of you are in the squad for the final, but you can earn it. Prove it." And it's just like absolute chaos in terms of everyone doing their bit. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's not, that's not, I don't think that's completely unreasonable. I mean, I don't think he's going to start, like, playing a whole second-rate team and going, right, you can earn this. But what I mean is in, like,
Scott
those
Carson
marginal
earns his way
players...
in.
Yeah, but like Dav said about Mahrez, is in his head, Pep Guardiola may think, right, I want to play Mahrez in the Champions League final. But if he plays Sterling, and it was interesting because I read an article earlier this week about Guardiola, and basically it was in reference to Sergio Aguero, because he's been injured for a while and not played particularly well when he's come back. But he basically said like he's going to be really cold in his selection. So I think if Guardiola, I mean obviously you're going to have players like Dav said, Diaz, De Bruyne, who are the undroppables. But I don't think it's out of the question for like if he's got Mahrez on paper, if Sterling plays an absolute stormer this weekend, I don't think it's out of the question for Guardiola to go right, you're in. As simple as that, really.
Fair.
So, I think there is an element of fitness in terms of, but I think the biggest thing with fitness is not whether City will benefit from having rested players. I think the bigger thing will be whether the players are sharp enough having rested players.
Speaking of that, you see it a lot in the American sports because they've got playoffs at the end of every season. NFL, NBA, NHL, all that sort of stuff. And I don't know what was happening in the championship, Dav, because I saw the form of those playoff teams towards the last 2 or 3 games wasn't particularly amazing. I don't know if they were resting guys or not, but what are your thoughts on resting players before key games to avoid injuries, but in a sense risking, as we were talking, the sort of sharpness of the match?
I think it depends on your manager, and because your manager knows your players. I think that's always one of the things. Your manager is with the players on the training ground. They've got all the stats on how much they've run, how much output they've given. And so when a player doesn't play on the weekend, we might think, oh, why isn't he playing? But like we haven't got the full picture with it. So I think I can't speak for all of the other championship teams, but I think there were some fans who were surprised that Steve Cooper didn't make as many changes in the last 2 or 3 games as he could have. He did make changes, but maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 in one game. But on the last game of the season, when we played Watford, we actually lost to them. He played pretty much the strongest team he could have played. So he obviously thought, like, I need to play like the strongest team. We want to try, and whether that's because we want to try something out, or we want to work on something, or whatever it is. So I think every manager is going to have a slightly different way of approaching it. But then for us, one of our centre backs and Ayew didn't play. He had a couple of games off, rested. So you've got to do it on an individual basis, haven't you? Like if, for example, De Bruyne is carrying a little bit of a knock, and Guardiola's thinking, well, I'm not going to risk him because it's not bad enough that he still won't go to the Euros, but Guardiola's thinking, I want to win the Champions League. That's the priority, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you think, you mentioned the NFL, it doesn't even have to go that far. Do you remember when, no Liverpool fan will care because they won it, but Liverpool Spurs as a game 2 years ago was one of the more turgid Champions League finals we've watched in ages.
It was that for me, like when I think to that Champions League campaign, that campaign was won in the semi-final as far as I'm concerned against Barca. As in that last game was just
because they'd had 2 weeks off, hadn't they? And both teams were just not at the races. So it can happen, can't it? It can happen. Teams can just, for whatever reason, they're not match fit. They're not sharp. And I mean, I don't know what the reasons for that are, but you'd kind of think it's a Champions League final. You're gonna want to be up for this. This is kind of the pinnacle. This is what you've been working towards.
True. Looking at the records between the two managers, obviously they've come up against Guardiola and Tuchel come up against each other in the past, particularly in their time in Germany. I haven't got their records for that, but since Chelsea's had Tuchel at the reins, he's beaten Guardiola in the 2 games they've played against each other. Do you think that's going to play into the sort of psyche of Guardiola?
Well, I think Guardiola, I would want to say no, because like he's obviously got where he's got and won every trophy, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that makes me hesitate is that we've seen Guardiola fiddle in the past with his formations and things and his team selections in the Champions League. So who's to say that those games won't have played on his mind? You know, but then in the FA Cup semi-final he didn't play the strongest team he could have. He did make 1 or 2 changes, and so Chelsea did play their strongest team. So is that a fair comparison? But I don't know. There's a little bit of me that just thinks you don't get to where someone like Guardiola has if things like that affect you too much. You know, surely it can't, because if it does, you wouldn't be the serial winner that he is. So,
sort of merging this with the point about the history of the two clubs and managers, Guardiola, what surprised me, he's only actually won 2 Champions Leagues as a manager. I thought he'd won more than that. I thought he'd at least won 3, maybe even 4. And Tuchel did take PSG to the final last season. Do you think, I mean, obviously the prestige of Pep is enormous because of his continued success, particularly domestically in all of these leagues. But do you think this could be a sort of, not changing of the guard per se, but is this the moment where Tuchel perhaps stamps his name amongst the really top-tier managers in the world?
All I would say on this front is Roberto Di Matteo. To be honest, like,
case
let's not
closed.
forget he won the Champions League with Chelsea, and then by the middle of the next season he was gone, and we haven't seen him since. So,
well, apart from his stint at West Brom, let's not forget that.
Well, that's the thing. I did forget that because it was dire. So, you know, I get what you're saying, but as in, you know, I don't think, you know, don't get me wrong, if Tuchel wins the Champions League at Chelsea, that's a great achievement given where Chelsea have been this season. But I don't think it would be a little bit soon to see it as changing of the guard. I mean, you could possibly ask questions of Guardiola in terms of the Champions League, as in, that would have meant he would have managed, you know, one of the best Bayern Munich teams we've seen and the best Man City team we've probably seen, and still not won the Champions League. And like Dav says, he does have a tendency to do like really quirky things with formation. Like you think back to and selection. Like you think back to the Champions League last year against, was it Lyon?
Yeah.
I think. You know, and he picked like a really, not a bad team, but as in like he picked what would be seen as perhaps a weaker team. And like, you know, it was seen as, you know, oh, he's basically resting players for the final, and it backfired. You know, I think back to when Liverpool, I'm only saying Liverpool because I watched the game, but I remember when Liverpool played City. I can't remember what year it was. But, you know, it was when Guardiola was there, and like he played Ilkay Gundogan as a winger. And you're like, why has he done that for? So Guardiola does have that tendency sometimes to do like quite odd things, but, you know, will he have learned his lesson? You know, but yeah, you know, I think I get what you're saying though, Jack. As in, like, Tuchel to a certain extent, okay, he's won Ligue 1 with a very dominant PSG side domestically. But, you know, if he wins the Champions League, does that kind of put him in that top tier of manager, I guess?
I mean, and a stat which I found today, which I thought was quite incredible, was that he's beaten Zidane, Guardiola twice, Jurgen Klopp, Simeone, Mourinho, and Ancelotti, only conceding once in all of those games. And it's like, that's insanely hard. Particularly when you think of teams like Zidane's Real and Guardiola's Man City. They are high-scoring sides.
But then
And
they lost to
Klopp's
Leicester
Liverpool.
on the weekend in the FA Cup, which on paper you would have had Chelsea as the favourites for that, surely.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be fair, Leicester won the game, but I think if you looked at it, you'd have thought Chelsea were the better team on the day. And obviously it doesn't matter because it was the result.
But at the end, that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's all about results. And Chelsea, with all of their financial might, have lost to Leicester in an FA Cup final. Have they?
That has gone under the radar. To be fair, Chelsea bought Timo Werner, Ziyech, Havertz. They got Thiago Silva on a free. But
let's not. Let's be fair. As in Tuchel has not managed. He's come in and he's not being able to make his own signings, which I do think is important for a manager. But it's not like he's come into a team short of quality. As in this is a team that still contains a 2-time Premier League winner in N'Golo Kante. You've got a lot of talent in that team.
Thiago Silva, a veteran of all competitions.
Exactly. And I know Timo Werner hasn't worked out, but as in Ziyech, he got to the Champions League semi-finals with Ajax not that long ago. You've got a very Mason Mount has come up trumps, really, isn't he? As in when you look at people were kind of questioning Gareth Southgate for picking Mason Mount, and now you'd question Southgate if he didn't pick him.
Yeah, he looks like a dead cert starter, doesn't he, for the Euros?
Yeah, absolutely. So as in, I don't think it's not a Chelsea team short of quality. But I don't know, it's a bit of a tricky one, really, because I think for Tuchel, if you were to lose this Champions League final, you would kind of possibly look at it and go, well, he's not even been there a season. You've got to give the guy a chance, really, haven't you? As in, I don't think that'll be the end of Tuchel at Chelsea, absolutely not. But
he could become a serial choker if he loses this, because they have lost last year's Champions League final, this year's Champions League final, and an FA Cup final.
Let's not forget, Jurgen Klopp built up that little bit of a reputation before he won the Champions League with Liverpool. It's quite easy to do, so I guess we'll have to see what happens.
Fair. Looking towards sort of the key battles that could come in, I mean, we did speak about Pep playing guys out of position. But when City and Chelsea last played in the Premier League, City played a 3-1-4-2 and Chelsea played a 3-4-2-1. Now, both of those formations were with sort of wingers who were playing right up and down. So really, those could be five at the backs, even at some situations. But
yeah.
What do you make of these formations? Do you think? I mean, classically, City's formations with Guardiola have been 4-3-3, but now you see all of these really out there formations. Do you think they're overdoing it a touch?
I think that, in as far as Guardiola's concerned, you would think it would make sense to stick to his guns and play 4-3-3. We'd be very rich if we knew what he was going to do next week. But, like you say, that it's unusual, Jack. I'm not sure it's that unusual in that this is the formation that Conte used where he played with three at the back. Whether it was a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-1-4-2, he played with three at the back with wing backs. We all love this formation because it's what Chris Coleman used with Wales in the Euros in 2016, wasn't it? He played three at the back with his wing backs. Right. I suppose 3-4-2-1 is the nearest thing that we had because we just we packed out the midfield and just let Gareth Bale do what he wanted. So they're not bizarrely unusual formations. They might just be for Man City in the way that Guardiola's that's just not the way that he plays with the wing backs. But I think that if you would expect after what's gone on in the past and the way that they beat PSG along the way to get here, City, I think I'd be very surprised if they didn't play 4-3-3.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well, I think if you're playing three at the back, you're relying heavily on your wing backs being up and down and being a source of creativity, I think, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying the City don't have creative right backs, but I feel like they'd be losing out further up the field by playing with wing backs, I think. As in, like, they've got enough quality in midfield and that front three to, I think, say, yeah, do you know what, we're going to play four at the back and we're going to play with a bit more quality and a bit, numbers in midfield and attack. So, yeah, I guess I agree with you, Dav. And I think the formations themselves aren't unusual, but as in, I think I'd be very surprised if City played that in the final.
Because, like you
Very
say, it's
surprised.
playing to your strengths, isn't it? So, like,
Yeah, exactly.
when Wales were at the Euros, that formation was playing to Wales's strengths.
Yeah.
It was being compact and counter-attack, and that worked. Whereas City are not that kind of counter-attacking team. They are keep the ball, bodies in midfield, triangles, pass. So
yeah,
I think I could see Chelsea playing that kind of formation again, possibly, because they do, like you said, Jack. They are, they didn't concede against all those managers, and even on the weekend, they lost to a screamer. Like, they controlled the game. They didn't give away any easy chances, and that's the way that's the way Chelsea set up. So I think you could have that, and I think that would make for a good game. You'd have two different styles, wouldn't you? And instead of trying to match one and another, just go for what you know, and I think that would make it a more exciting game of football.
Do you think that's the right strategy to go for, to play to your strengths? Because, I mean, you look at guys like Mourinho, who are particularly good in the cup competitions. He's known for not playing to his strengths, but playing to the opponent's weakness. Like, you think when his Inter Milan beat Barcelona, I don't think he was playing the most optimal formation for Inter Milan's game plan, but they were playing the best formation to stop Barcelona's game plan in that situation. So do you not think they do need to go out there and go, well, what's their most lethal asset? Block that off?
Yeah, I'm not completely
put
against
two guys on De Bruyne?
I'm not against it as a principle, but I just think, like, Guardiola's tried that in the past and it hasn't worked.
Fair.
I agree.
So
and
just go for it.
Yeah. I think the thing is, as well, without wanting to be too philosophical, I think, you say Mourinho played to the weakness of the opposition, but I think, in a weird way, when you look at Mourinho teams, that was their strength, as in being defensive, being difficult to break down, basically just playing the most cynical form of football you can. Whereas, like Dav said, I think if City were to go and do something radical formation-wise, I think that only plays, or Chelsea, I think that only ever plays into the opposition's hands. I think you've got to stick to what you do well, and then you've got to trust how you play, that will cancel out the opposition, I think, to a certain extent. I think it's different as well, because I think, like when I get what you're saying between Barcelona and Inter Milan, but was it Barcelona? Yeah. But as in, I think there was a gulf in quality between those two sides, like a massive gulf. Whereas when you look at City and Chelsea, they're both very good teams. And I think, I don't think it's going to be short of creativity, is it?
No, absolutely not. Talking about how good the teams are, neither team seems to have an out-and-out striker that is performing well. Timo Werner, I mean, he was celebrating a goal which clearly came off of his hand in the game against Leicester, and that got disallowed. So that shows the sort of mental fragility he has. But Aguero also is not in the best of form, trying that chip against Chelsea the last time they met with that penalty. Do you think this game could come down to which forward is playing worse on the day?
Well, do you want a little quiz? How many goals do you think Timo Werner would have scored this season if we didn't have VAR?
If we didn't have VAR?
Yeah.
I'm going to say...
So, how many goals has VAR disallowed of Werner?
I think it's disallowed. I'm going to say 15. I know that might seem... Maybe I've gone way over and destroyed the points, but...
I feel like I might have seen this article, but I think it was something like 14 or 15, yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. So he scored 12 legitimately, and he's had 14 ruled out.
But to be fair, though...
So he scored 26 goals. But half of them, they brought it back for whether offside or, like you say, Jack, the other night, that handball, like
it
to
couldn't be
handball
more
it in,
obvious.
and then to be
the
like
arrogance
to be on your knees in the corner, like that takes some guts, doesn't it? Fair play.
Or was he compensating for the fact that he knew that it was a handball and be like, right lads, if I get on my knees and slide,
it's like
everyone's going to believe me.
It's like 10 years ago. Just celebrate. The ref will give it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was over the line. It was over the line. Everyone to the corner. It's like the other team's playing on, but he's like, well, I have the ball over there. It's got to be.
I think that just shows like the.
But he has equally missed quite a lot of opportunities. Which...
Yeah, he has. But I think there's enough there for him to be able to click in. You could end up looking really stupid writing Werner off now. Give it a year, give it a season or two. Yeah. He could easily be, he scored 12 goals, having had another 12, 14 ruled out. Well, that means he's got the potential to be scoring 20 goals a season. He's in the right places, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, that's for the future. In as far as the here and now, does that mean he's obviously not in a great form for the final, but I can't say that Divock Origi was in great form going into Champions League final a couple of years ago, but he scored a goal, so...
True. And just going a little bit further back, sort of the last sort of key battle, do you think this is going to be the De Bruyne show if he's fit, or do you think Chelsea have got about 4 players, Ziyech, Havertz, Pulisic, Mount, do you think it could be one of them that could be the key to the game? Who do you think is going to be the standout player which decides this final?
I mean, I think Mount is crucial for Chelsea, isn't he?
Yeah.
Right now, as in he's like, to be fair to Mason Mount, and not that I'm any sort of amazing footballing pundit or anything like that, but as in for a lot of this season, I've kind of been like, oh, is Mason Mount really that good? But like, he scored a cracking goal against Liverpool, and I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. I think I might have been wrong on this one, and he's been excellent ever since. So I think for Chelsea, Mount is key. And obviously for City, Kevin De Bruyne, you want him firing on all cylinders really to give you the best chance, particularly if you're missing that kind of striking threat up top. Having De Bruyne a bit deeper to perhaps offer some, some firepower is never a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, I think you're right there, Jack. It'll be the De Bruyne versus Mount show. That'll be where the kind of creativity and the play will go through.
Go on, finish your point if you didn't have anything else to say there.
Yeah, no, I just think that it'll come down to that. And now we've said that, Fernandinho will score a hat-trick. So
that would be an exciting
Scott
game.
Carlson from a goal kick.
Well, that would be even more insane.
Or a corner like Alisson did the other day.
Oh, if that happened, that would be insane.
Football would be broken. As
we mentioned before, the last All England final we had was a stinker. Do you not worry this could be the same?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I feel like the big factor with that one was the 2-week gap they had.
Fair.
Where it was just kind of like lingering. And I do think... I'd hasten to say that the quality this time is better, but I feel like perhaps it's a bit more balanced. As in, I think with Liverpool Spurs, there was always a kind of, I don't know, perhaps I'm just being a bit of a biased Liverpool fan, but I think you always had Liverpool perhaps as the favourites, given their league form that year and the way they'd knocked Barcelona out. Whereas this time around, this is probably, like, who was in the Champions League final? Yeah, I don't know, this is one of the closer or the more difficult to call clashes we've had in the Champions League for some time, I think.
Oh, yeah. To be fair, I think PSG Bayern last year was quite well matched.
Yes.
You didn't know who was going to win, but yeah, I get what you mean.
But that was a 1-0 really tight contest as well, though, wasn't it?
Like, yeah, it was cagey, yeah.
And
really
you almost
cagey.
expect finals to be a little bit like that, don't you? You don't have finals that are like wide open games. Like,
when you think about some of the finals we've had, like you said, we had Bayern PSG, which was a 1-0. The year before we had Liverpool versus Spurs, which was 2-0, but it was 1-0 until like the 80-something minute until we scored from a corner. The year before that, Liverpool got hammered by Madrid.
3-1.
It was 4-1, wasn't it?
No, 3-1.
I think it was 3. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't as bad as you thought.
Karius's slippy hands.
It felt pretty bad at the time, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that was that wonder goal from Bale, isn't it? Like Jack said.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true, yeah. But yeah,
it counts for 2.
I a lot of the time I feel like Champions League finals aren't the most expansive games of football. They're just intense, cagey affairs, aren't they? But I think that's part of what makes them interesting, I guess.
Well, when Real Madrid, they beat Juventus at 4-1 the year before that, didn't they? And that was in Cardiff.
Yeah.
And I think in as far as normal time, because they did score 4 against Atletico a couple of years before that, but to win 4-1 in 90 minutes, like I think, wasn't that like the first time there'd been a side had scored 4 goals in a final in like 20 years or something? Like,
really?
So it doesn't, so it doesn't
happen often.
No, exactly. I mean, I know that you had like 3-3 with Liverpool and Istanbul, and you can get plenty of threes, but point being, you don't expect a final to be wide open. And the last time City played Chelsea in the league a couple of weeks ago, it was 2-1. It was a good competitive game. Like, the game isn't necessarily about winning a game 4-3 and that was a good game, is it? I mean, we know that. So I don't think it'll. I think it has all the makings of a great match, because tactically it's 2 very different teams, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Going on to it then, who do you think is going to win the final?
I mean, as a Liverpool fan, I want to say neither.
Oh, I want to say Chelsea.
I was going to say, what answer is that? As a Liverpool fan, Tranmere.
Yeah, as in, I to be honest, like my head says I honestly don't know. It could go either way. I think purely on the fact that I don't want either of them to win, I'm about as objective as I could possibly be.
I
don't know.
I think I would have thought, because before, obviously the money in the last few years, like Liverpool fans would always kind of lean towards City because they were not as competitive, and you'd prefer City over United and all of that kind of thing. So now obviously you wouldn't say City, but I'd still have thought, given the history that there is with Chelsea, if you had to push a Liverpool fan, would they say City? Maybe just through gritted teeth.
I think that's kind of the scenario I'm in, and also from the point of view of there's still that, without wanting to be a little bit childish, Man City, if they were to lose, there is also still that element of they still not won the Champions League.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Whereas Chelsea have already won it, so obviously it'll still be massive for Chelsea, as is massive for any team. But it'll kind of be like, oh well, you've done that already. But then at the same time, I don't particularly want Chelsea to have won 2 Champions League trophies.
If I'm honest, when I asked the question, I thought I said, who do you think will win? And clearly I've messed up my wording, because I must have said, who do you want to win? By the sound to your reaction. But who do you think will win then? Or did I ask that before?
I think you did ask that, but because I couldn't bring myself to say an answer.
Oh, fair. I wasn't sure. I thought, did I say think?
I'll try and add a bit more objectivity, maybe. I think even though he's won it before as a manager, I just think, given all that he's done at City, and think of him what he is, but Guardiola is a footballing genius. There's a little bit of me that maybe for the poetry of it, for the romance of it, I would, of the two, it would be, given that they haven't won it before, I'd maybe lean slightly more towards City, just because of the way that they've played and the season they've had and the way that the way that they've got there. But you could easily argue it the other way, and maybe I'd
Yes.
maybe I'd be frowned upon for saying what I've said. But I think it's just it's an attractive style of football, and it's enjoyable to watch. And yeah, you know, what I think he kind of deserves it then, because you can at least say his time at City has been a success.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
in all seriousness, I think completely objectively, I would probably say I think City are going to win.
and if he does win at a City, that's like he's ticked the box and he might leave.
Yeah.
And that'd be great for all of us other teams. Give us all a chance.
So hang on. You just ripped into me for not being completely objective, and that's your justification for thinking the City are going to win. Gosh.
Well, truthfully, I guess this does put me on the line, because I agree with your statement about Chelsea. I'd rather them win it because they've won it before. It's nothing new. It's like Liverpool winning it 6 times. You know, it's nothing new. They already won it 5 times. What's the difference? So you know what I mean? That's why I like them, but at the same time, yeah, let's get a bit of Guardiola. He's bad for the English game.
Guardiola out.
Yes.
Right. On that note, are we going to call it there for this evening? We'll call it there. Thank you all for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, why not subscribe? Give the video a like. Perhaps leave some comments as what you think on our predictions and subjective thoughts on the Champions League final. If you're listening on Spotify, why not give us a follow? We're also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Anchor, Pocket Casts. Have I done them all, Jack?
Yes, all of them.
Cool. Dav, thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure to be at the Bonanza.
Good stuff. And Jack and I will speak to you all again soon.